Hey there. So my next guest journeys through life. He worked at a hedge fund, decided he wanted to get into game development, and now he's like in this process of figuring out his place in the game development world. And he talks us through his journey and the ups and the downs and kind of having to figure things out. This was a wonderful interview, very fun. He gives lots of great information. I know you're all going to love it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Gamerpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today, I have a very special guest with us. I have Drake Autery. Hey there, Drake. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going? Good. How are you?
It is a beautiful sunny day in Las Vegas. How about yourself?
It's pretty nice here in New York, actually, as well. So I'm pumped. I'm gonna actually go look at some apartments later. So it's a good weather for that.
Beautiful house hunting. I love it. Okay. Now, Drake, I like getting right into it. So that was the extent of the small talk we do on the show. We're just going to go straight into it. So why don't you begin just by telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So I am currently a game developer and product manager, but it's funny because I actually like my educational experience is really nothing to do with that. I started back in college studying finance and philosophy, and then I kind of like I started working at a hedge fund for a while and got myself involved into technology by that. And kind of throughout that process of, working as a kind of business analyst to start and then product manager, I on the side was like improving my technical chops by studying some game development and stuff on the side, which was great. Then after a few years, or I guess it was 6 years at the hedge fund, I ended up just saying, you know what, I'm going to try to do this full time. So I did that. Switched over, made my company drakesgames for a year and a half, 2 years, made some awesome mobile games, just mostly learning and having a great time. And now I actually work at a company called Backtrace that makes crash and error reporting a tool for game developers, which is really cool because it's like I'm slowly moving into the industry and I'm actually getting paid, which is very nice. So.
All right, I love it. Drake, that's fantastic. Gives us a lot to talk about. Before we do that, though, I start every interview with a single question. So I'm going to ask you, just like I ask everybody else, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how weird are you, Drake?
Oh, I was so excited for you to ask this question because I was like, we could talk for 30 minutes at least just on this. I'm gonna push it back to you at first though and say, what does a 1 mean and what does a 10 mean?
So I leave this up to you as
Gotcha.
10 being high, 1 being low, right? Your definition of weird, not what your friends say about you, not what your significant other says about you, but you internally, what do you think you're at?
Yeah, well, I tend to overthink things. So like generally I'm like, all right, well, to appropriately do this, I'd have to come up with like what my sense of normal is, but then normal is all relative. And so like, I guess even me having this conversation with you means I'm probably pretty weird, I guess. But then again, I think most people are weird relative to everybody else. So I don't know, like a 6 or a 7, maybe.
That's a fantastic answer. See, you didn't come in with like a 6,000. Like,
oh no, like... yeah. I mean, I maybe I'm playing too close within your defined bounds, but that's okay.
It's all good. All right, now this is the Gamerpreneur, Drake. So I do need your gaming cred. When did you first start playing video games?
Oh, this is actually super funny. So my parents told me this later. I didn't realize it at the time, but I started with Super Nintendo because my parents bought it for me when I was maybe like 7 or 8. And it was just so they could sleep in longer. And that really backfired on them because now it's like my favorite thing ever. But so I started Super Nintendo. Earliest memories are probably like Mega Man X. I remember and Pokemon like Red and Blue. I guess that might have been a little bit after when I had the Game Boy Pocket. But yeah, that's the earliest memories I think I have. I remember playing Mega Man X with my brother, and he and I were so bad at it that when I first got to Storm Eagle, one of the bosses in the game, I remember rushing to school because I was late that day for whatever reason and talking to him about it. And it's just so silly how bad we were because that was like a big moment in our lives.
I love it. And I'm assuming your love of video games continued since then.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, growing up, I got a job, my first job, when I was in middle school at a dentist office because I wanted to make money so I could buy video games and anime, basically. So growing up, I had like every console you could imagine, and just like, it carried through my entire adolescence, and then even into now. Obviously, I'm doing game development and I still love games. So
Fantastic. Okay, what do you play today, if anything?
a lot of different things, but most of them are like Steam indie games. So I'm super excited about the Steam Deck's release or announcement, because I'll finally be able to take that library with me on the go. So I'm pretty pumped about that. But games like, I started playing a lot of indie roguelikes back when like Binding of Isaac first came out. That came out when I was in college. And ever since then, basically whenever there's a ripoff of that or a clone, I play it because I just love them and can't get enough of it. But so that's like the indie side of things. I'm actually playing what's it called? Not Crusaders 2. Anyways, it's like a what's it called? First person slasher game that's really fun to play with my friend. I played a lot of Valheim with another friend. It's like usually the multiplayer games are a good way for me to keep in contact with friends that live in different cities and stuff like that. And then I also am lucky enough to have gotten a PS5, so I've played a lot of like Demon Souls and Spider-Man and all of the 5 games that are out for that console at this point.
Wonderful. Okay, now Drake, I'm going to ask you a question that I've been told is the hardest question I ask on this show. What do you consider your favorite game of all time?
Ooh, luckily you did help me prepare. So I think I'm going to have to answer 2 different ones. So in my early childhood, Banjo-Kazooie was my favorite game. I loved that. Like the music, I played that so many times that I had it memorized, such that when it came out for the Xbox Live Arcade and they had leaderboards associated with it, without even trying, I was like number 13th ranked on the leaderboard for speed runs for a 100% speed run. Not like real speed running, but just the leaderboard that was up there at the time. And then in my adult life, I think all of the From Software games, but specifically Dark Souls, the original Dark Souls, it was my first From Software game that I played. I think what that team and Miyazaki are doing is just so incredible. I love the difficulty. I love the level design and the atmosphere. Everything about it is just amazing.
All right, I love it. Okay, now Drake, let's get over to the preneur part. Now, you did give us a little bit of your background at the beginning. I'd like to dive in a little bit more. Like, what made you go into doing the hedge fund work? What exactly was the journey you took, and what did you do to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean,
like, how was this chain forged?
In some ways, I'm just, I'm very lucky. My parents helped me a lot with college applications and paying for college. And then I found myself at University of Massachusetts in the business school, which was, a good department of theirs at the time, probably still is. But and then I basically was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And my girlfriend's dad or grandfather at the time was like, you should be closer to the money because that's the people who make more money. So that I just was a finance major literally because of that. I know it's pretty silly, but getting into it and understanding a lot of the math and the analytics behind finance and really trying to understand the world, it was actually interesting to me. And so I kind of pursued that and really dug into it and enjoyed it. And that's kind of what led me to Bridgewater, which was the hedge fund that I worked at. It was the largest hedge fund in the world for, I don't know if it still is, but at least at the time that I joined, the founder, Ray Dalio, he's like on the news sometimes. And I started off on the trading floor. It's like the equivalent or the trading floor, but in operation. So just like basically making sure nobody else messed up their trades and that type of thing, helping with some technological rollouts, that type of thing. But it was like the equivalent of starting in the mailroom or something. It was a very bottom tier, just like get in the door type of role. And it's like my transition into technology actually kind of was totally lucky because of that. That role happened to have some proximity to the technology department because we would help shepherd releases onto the trading floor, which was a big hullabaloo because you want it to be clean and not mess up trading and all that type of thing. And so that then ended up getting me some contacts and friends in the tech department there, which kind of helped me go into more of a junior product manager role, and then into a like more senior product management role at that company, if that makes sense. Sorry, I know I'm just like rambling and saying a bunch of stuff, but hopefully that journey makes sense to you.
Absolutely. Okay, very cool. And you decided to start Drake's Games. And why? Why games? Why, like, you said you were close to technology, but why games? I understand you grew up with it, but
Yeah. So I mean, during the process of learning about technology and how to run a team that has lofty software development goals, like at a hedge fund trying to build like an automated trading platform, that type of thing, my interest was piqued, and I had multiple times like learned a little bit of coding and that type of thing in my free time. But I had a realization. It was like I think it was like literally over one weekend where I was like, maybe if I actually try to tie my interests to trying to learn a new skill, it would actually propel me even more forward. And one of the things that I think some people who dabble in game development find is that it's a lot different from playing games. And just because you like games doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be a good game developer or that you'll even like it. But I was lucky enough to start dabbling in it and really like it. And so probably like the last year and a half or so that I was working at Bridgewater, I was doing it and enjoying it, but I knew that I was never going to really be able to like take it to the next level until I did it full time and surrounded myself with people in the industry to learn from, because it's so complicated and stuff. And so I quit my job and basically just pursued it as a kind of passion type of thing, if that makes sense. And specifically, it was just that, it was the perfect alignment between my interest in technology and my interest in playing video games. And the thing that keeps me going and makes me still excited about it is that as I learn more about video game development and how they're made, it helps me actually appreciate playing games even more. And so this is, no matter what happens with Drake's Games, I think I'll always do some game development because of that.
absolutely. So what's the goal then? You currently have a job and you're doing making some softwares for game developers, but like what comes next? You said you want to get closer to industry. Where are you aiming?
Yeah, well, so I mean, long term, I would love to be high up in a studio, if not my own studio. And by high up, I mean, I wouldn't be so audacious to say I know exactly where my strengths in the game development, life cycle, or making a game are, but I know that I really want to have impact and make something great, even if that means just being a great senior producer and helping other game designers or creatives, like facilitating them or something like that. So it's a bit cloudy in terms of my end goal, but it's like short term, continuing to learn about myself and enjoying it and pursuing happiness on a day-to-day basis, and then longer term, setting myself up for being able to have impact in an industry that I really care about, which is games.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, your journey has been interesting because like a lot of people pick one thing and then they're there their entire lives, but you've bounced around, you've tried your own thing, you kind of have this direction you're wanting to head. This makes you different, not necessarily weird like I asked at the beginning, but you're definitely different than the vast majority of people. What makes you different? What quality, what characteristic, what trait is it that sets you apart from everybody else?
Well, I think a big part of it is just that I have a natural curiosity, and so um, that allows me to pursue a lot of different things. Well, so part of it, to even take a further step back, is that I'm very lucky. I don't have any debt from school. Being in finance out at the outset, I was able to save some money. And because of that money, I'm able to have some freedom in terms of choosing which paths I go down. That plus my natural curiosity, which I think is an innate characteristic of myself, means that I'm always poking my head in different things. And then on top of that, like I have some level of drive, so I actually do kind of follow through with things that I find that I like, if that makes sense.
Certainly. Okay. So financial institutions, game companies, the software, the tech, totally different things, I'm assuming, right? So when you made this transition over into the gaming world, you kind of had to figure out how to do all this. What resources did you turn to learn? Because obviously you have that natural curiosity, you probably dove into it. If someone wanted to follow in your footsteps, where would they turn to start learning this?
Well, specifically, if you're coming into game development from the place of not having a ton of computer science background, I would recommend doing a proper course on like Coursera or Udemy or something like that. There's a bunch of them. You can Google like best Unity courses, best Unreal courses, that type of thing. And specifically, I picked a few that were like a combination of learning Unity, the engine, and learning C#, the programming language. And if you can find one, which there are a bunch of them out there, specifically on Coursera, that do a good balance of those two things and explaining why you're doing stuff behind it, that's a great way to start. But I would caution people against doing that for too long, because if you're just in the classroom type of mindset and not working on your own projects, that can be stifling in its own way. So I'd say start out doing that and then pivot to just come up with a fun project, low in scope, small, that you want to create, and then just use YouTube and Stack Overflow and Unity forums and Unity answers, or the equivalent on the Unreal side, to just plug in the holes and gaps where you need it.
On your end, what are some of the biggest challenges you've had in overcoming these knowledge barriers, or what aspect of this business has been most difficult for you?
I think it's complicated. I mean, game development is really hard. So it's one of those things that you will run into walls. You will lose your mojo, if you will. It's like you first open up Unity and it's overwhelming, and then maybe after a week, same thing with Unreal. After a week, you're like, okay, I think I start to get it, and then you introduce a new concept, and all of a sudden you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and that like constant process, it's kind of similar in learning anything that's relatively complex, but that it's been tough, but it's because it's an overlap between so many things that I really enjoy. It was a good kind of difficult, where you overcome it and then you look back and you're like, wow, I can't believe what I'm able to do now and how much I've learned and how far I've come. And so I think it's just staying motivated and treating yourself well through that process.
So when you look back at the mobile games you made, are you proud of them, or are you a little embarrassed?
Oh, both 100%, mostly embarrassed. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because especially because a few of them are game jam games where it's just such a roll of the dice between what team you get and what you're able to hack together in some small amount of time. So there's a lot of pride in that. And then but just my personality type is such that I always look back on the mistakes that I made and what I could have done better. And so I am a bit embarrassed by a lot of the things that I've put out.
Good. Okay, Drake, I want to hop in a time machine with you. All right. We're going to go back in time, and let's say back to when I think you said your girlfriend or your fiance's grandfather gave you that advice. So I want you to go up to little Drake back then, and you're going to get to be able to tell little Jake everything that's going to happen to him in his life, all the ups, all the downs, all the good, all the bad. You're going to be impart all of the wisdom and knowledge and experience you've had through the years upon him. But if there was only one thing he absolutely had to know to make his life bigger, better, more successful, however you define that, what would that one thing be?
It's tough because you never know if you change one thing, what's going to happen going forward. But my gut, and one of my big regrets, is I wish I went to school for a STEM degree. I wish I studied math, computer science, physics, something like that. Because practically speaking, that analytical muscle, even if it doesn't come natural to you, which, let's be honest, for most people it doesn't, I think there is so much to learn from being technologically competent, from being analytical, that type of thing. And if you have a STEM degree, if you're technologically competent, if you're mathematically literate, you can do whatever else you want. And if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, kind of related to that question, I want to get a little personal with you if I can. See, I believe that we learn the most in our life from our failures, not necessarily our successes. Because when you succeed the first time you try something, you may not quite know what exactly happened. It might have been luck, who knows, right? But if you fail, you got to take a look at it. You got to figure out what went wrong to be able to move past it, iterate until you succeed in the future. So I'd like to ask you, Drake, what do you consider your biggest failure in life and what did you learn from it?
I mean, from my perspective, I think failures happen all the time, and I think if you're not failing, you're not living life well enough. But the big problem is like big failures to me are just like the accumulation of not addressing smaller failures, and so I think for a big part of my life, I was, I don't know, like emotional or easily just easily dissuaded from trying or putting myself out there because you had confidence issues or that type of thing. And that was something that it took me a long time to be able to recognize and address. And I think looking back, I would have been a lot more successful in my earlier years if I had been able to get over that. But that's, it's difficult to say because it's like, you're a kid and you're just trying to learn, and you don't really know who you are, or your brain's not fully developed yet. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for sharing. On the flip side of that question, what is something that you're working to improve on in yourself today?
Let me see. So there's like the general career subject matter expertise stuff, right? So game development, like product management and design, and general computer science and engineering are three like things that I study in my free time and will constantly do because I love learning and I want to improve my ability to output more cool things into the world. Personally, I think I've been really working on like mental health, especially over the past couple of years, really trying to be mindful and in the moment, and not let life pass me by. And it's so easy, especially when you're studying something really focused and at your desk all day. It's hard to take a step back and appreciate life and not let it slip by. And so I just turned 30, and so that's a big thing that I'm really trying to do.
I appreciate that. I remember 30 hurt. Okay. To bring this in for a landing, one more question. What advice would you have for someone who would want to follow in your footsteps? Maybe they sit here, they're listening to you. They're like, man, that sounds great. Having the finance and then moving into the games like that. I think that would give me like the right knowledge I need to do this. Like how would somebody do that? How would they follow in that flow?
It's tough to answer because everybody's situations are different, right? And so like part of, like I alluded to before, I was very lucky in having my undergraduate degree paid for. My parents had been saving since I was a kid, and not everybody has that. And so I didn't have this looming debt over me when I first came out of school. So that's probably my first answer is make sure that you don't overextend yourself and take out too much leverage, especially if you don't know what you're buying, which I think oftentimes people going into an undergraduate degree don't really know because they haven't done the analysis, nor should they really be expected to in the job market afterwards. But putting that aside, I'd say just try to lean into things that you're interested in as much as possible and listen to your own emotions. And if you're not having fun, like pivot away. If you think you really want to do game development and you're confident in that, then I would say just start doing it. Because it's like no matter where you are in life, the technology is cheap. There's free YouTube resources, and you can just do it right now. So I wish I had started 10, 20 years earlier. Somebody watching this would be caught up to me in just a couple of years of studying this on their own time. So the barriers to entry are pretty low to get to my level of game development relevance. But also you got to pay attention to making money and actually be able to support yourself, which is also I think where it comes into where you can do stuff in your free time and that can help push you and like keep your dream alive long term or something like that, while you're actually working a day job.
Absolutely. Too many people think that they can live on passion and not bread.
Exactly.
All right, Drake, this has been a fantastic interview. Thank you so much. How do people find you? Where are you at on social media? Contact information, all that, please.
Sure. I think probably the best place is Twitter, though I'm not as active as I'd like to be. That's just at Drake's Games. So DrakesGames. And then I'm on LinkedIn, my name, Drake Autery. And there's also a Drake's Games page on LinkedIn. And Instagram is Drake's Games Studio, or I think something like that. You'll find it. There is a logo of a little duck. So, yeah.
Wonderful. All right. As we wrap this up, do you have any final thoughts you want to share? Anything I didn't ask you think we still need to cover?
No, I appreciate the time. I really thank you. It's cool what you're doing here. Really, I watched a few of the interviews. They're really awesome, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, Drake, thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to come on with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And for everybody else, I'm going to remind you all, don't be just a gamer, be a gamerpreneur.